Greetings. My name is Tim Gates, and you are now witnessing what will be the first of however many it takes little videos where we're going to be reading a journey. Um, this is a book that came out last year, the end of last year, and one that I had the real pleasure of writing. What a blast! It's the most fun thing I've ever done. And so it's called A Journey. The subtitle is An Attempt and Sometimes Struggle at Being Real in This World. So it's recently come to my attention that there's a whole lot of people that really don't like to read books. I love to read books. A lot of folks would much rather hear it via audio version. So this is the official approved audio version of A Journey. I couldn't get Morgan Freeman to do it, so here you go. So today we're going to take a look at, I think we'll just look at the preface and the introduction and the first chapter. We'll see how that goes. Um, I'm sure I'll throw in commentary on occasion, but that I get to do that. So we'll get started here. The opening actually comes from a journal entry that was dated September 9th of 2015. Good morning, God. It's been a long time since I wrote in a journal. I think it's time to start doing it again. Yesterday really took the wind out of my sails. Still don't know what to think about the whole thing. Still don't know whether to laugh or to cry. I've done both. It looks like I lost about 6 months and 35,000 words worth of writing. On the one hand, I'm not really a writer, so what difference does it make? On the other hand, I don't know if I've ever been so passionate about doing anything as I am, or at least was, about writing the memoir. It's so hard to know if this was some kind of divine intervention or just me being a total bonehead and losing all the data. Maybe a little bit of both. I really don't know. Carol and each of the kids have all been super supportive and encouraging, and they all want me to keep on writing and not be discouraged. They're looking forward to reading a finished story someday. By the way, you'll have to put up with my foibles too. Sorry about that. Right now, I'm very discouraged. In the big scheme of things, though, I've got as long as it takes to do this. I'll definitely be more careful about backing everything up. Oh yeah, Carol greeted me this morning with a verse from the song, You Can't Roller Skate in a Buffalo Herd. It goes like this. You can't roller skate in a buffalo herd, but you can be happy if you've a mind to. All you got to do is put your mind to it. Knuckle down, buckle down, do it, do it, do it. I think that's just what I needed to hear. Carol's the greatest. Until next time. Around 3 years ago, I started looking at a couple old journals from the 70s and then one written between 2003 and 2005. While rereading what had been recorded about 40 years and then more than 10 years from the past, I developed an overwhelming desire to start writing a memoir. Unquestionably aware of the privileged and wonderful life I've been given, I wanted to put together some kind of written record of it, something at least my wife and kids could have, and maybe even a few others might like to read if they found it interesting. Who knows? Some folks might even find that they could relate to a few of the adventures I had had the good fortune of experiencing. Well, after having putting pen to paper, actually fingers to computer keys, for several months, I was having lunch in a wonderful little Vietnamese restaurant near our home and was also doing a little work on the notes. I saved my document both to the computer and to a thumb drive as I'd been doing all along. This time, however, having absolutely no idea how, I somehow saved not the document I'd just been working on, but a version from about 6 months and 35,000 words prior. I'd overwritten my current copy with this old transcript and then saved it. Pardon me. All the work from the previous 6 months was gone. A bit later in the day, while trying to squeak in a little more time on the computer, it became evident to me what had happened. Talk about wanting to throw up. I certainly did. So here we were. Oh, by the way, the book actually reads, for the next few days. I certainly did. So here we were, deciding whether or not the last several months had just been a giant waste of effort, and wondering if maybe it was time to bag the whole idea of writing a memoir, or should I just consider this as part of the great adventure and press on? I ended up trying to go with the latter. In the words of Roger Miller, as Carol lovingly sang to me, I won't try to sing it, all you got to do is put your mind to it. Knuckle down, buckle down, do it, do it, do it. Kind of corny, but pretty good advice all the same. Who knows, maybe this little story will actually get written. My bonehead mishap versus journalistic reboot from God has even given me some motivation to start journaling again. I'm so glad that there have been times in life over the last 40 years when I saw the value of writing things down. It has helped to re-recognize what a wonderful adventure life really is. If it weren't for those old journals, I wouldn't have had anything to help refresh so many wonderful memories today. I'm a fortunate guy to have so many good memories to remember. All right. So, it was 1974, the summer after our junior year in high school. A sunny, beautiful, perfect day for a few high school buddies to be cruising Point Defiance Park in my '64 Jeep Willys mail truck with, mind you, the steering wheel on the right side. What an undeniably awesome truck. Cream yellow, a black stripe across the sides, shag carpet throughout, and very cool Astro mags. Drinking beer, most assuredly smoking pot, it was the 70s after all, and taking turns sharing BAs with those poor, unfortunate, and unsuspecting drivers and passengers in the cars behind us. That's a bare ass for anyone from a younger generation. Suddenly, the Indian tapestry curtains hanging across the back windows of the truck would part, and voila, a bare butt to greet you. Life, as most of us have found, is so full of unexpected surprises. Some welcome, some not so. We thought this was hilarious. I'd have to say that I grew up a privileged kid. The youngest of 4 boys, I was the baby of the family. Mom and Dad were they were the 2 finest people I've ever known. They were kind and generous and honest. They were real. What you saw is exactly what you got. Dad grew up during the Depression on a farm in Deming, Washington, one of 6 kids born to Guy and Katie. They didn't have a lot. As was true of many young men at that time, Dad joined the military and was a veteran of World War II. His areas of military service included Pearl Harbor, Australia, North Africa, Palestine, India, China, and I'm not sure where else. On December 7th, 1941, my dad was aboard ship having left Pearl Harbor just 6 days prior. Thank you God the unit he was with left Hawaii when they did. Dad was awarded the Air Medal by General H.H. Arnold, commander of Army Air Forces during World War II, and a pioneer airman who was personally taught how to fly by the Wright brothers. The Distinguished Flying Cross was also pinned onto Dad's chest by World War I flying ace Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. My father retired from the Air Force as a Chief Master Sergeant, and I believe was among the very first group of individuals to receive that distinguished rank. Dad was a hero. I never knew about my father's military history until I became a young adult and saw some of the newspaper clippings that Mom had kept. He just never talked about it. Dad, by the way, seldom went to church while we were growing up. He used to say he didn't want to be a hypocrite. I never really understood just what he meant at that time. One of my father's most notable accomplishments was to catch the eye of Miss Peggy Sharp. That's my mom. Mom grew up one of 4 kids in Mount Vernon, Washington, the daughter of Melbourne and Bessie. Excuse me. Grandpa was the bridge tender for a long since dismantled bridge that crossed the Skagit River in Mount Vernon. Grandma was from Ireland and had come to the United States on the Olympic, sister ship to the Titanic. The story goes that she was booked to sail on the Titanic, but for some reason had to change plans and make the voyage on the Olympic. Thank you, God, for unexpected changes in our plans. And to think that she was probably disappointed and maybe even upset about not getting to sail on the Titanic as originally scheduled. Mom was the greatest example of Jesus with skin on that I've ever met. If you knew my mom, you know how she had a supernatural love, the kind that puts other people first, the kind that the Bible talks about where Paul says, if you've gotten anything at all out of following Christ, if his love has made any difference in your life, if being in a community of the Spirit means anything to you, if you have a heart, if you care, then do me a favor. Agree with each other, love each other, be deep-spirited friends. Don't push your way to the front. Don't sweet talk your way to the top. Put yourself aside and help others get ahead. Don't be obsessed with getting your own advantage. Forget yourself long enough to lend a helping hand. That comes from Philippians 2, 1-4. And it's out of the Message. That's the way my mom was with everybody, the way she lived. Although there have been many wonderful people who have influenced my life, Mom is by far the reason I ever was motivated to embark on this spiritual journey that life has to offer. Mom was a hero. So now we're at chapter 1. It's entitled Strange Stuff. The late 60s and 70s were a very interesting, significant, and sometimes crazy time to be growing up. With the assassination of beloved leaders and politicians, the Vietnam War, drugs, rock and roll music, the sexual revolution, hippies, the Jesus movement, there was no shortage of ideas, ideologies, philosophies, and adventures to consider and to participate in. I always wanted to be a hippie. It was probably the summer of '66 when my folks decided to take a car trip down the west coast of Washington, Oregon, and California, bringing along my brother Pat and me. Our visit to San Francisco was my most memorable part of the trip. Never had I seen so many of these exceptional-looking people. In particular, I'll never forget the long, frizzy, red-haired mailman who was happily making his way down a hilly San Francisco street with his mail bag. I decided then that not only did I want to be a hippie, but also a mailman. Also, by the way, while at a Chinese restaurant in the city by the bay, the nice owner of the place taught Pat and me how to use chopsticks. Given my love for Asian cuisine and gluttonous nature, this has been a skill I've always been grateful for. Alas, I was born a little too late in the 20th century to really be part of those strange and wonderful people called hippies. Sure, in later years I did grow my hair a bit longer, and I did live in a school bus along with a friend David and our 3 dogs during the senior year of high school. And there was the mail truck. Still, I was more of a wannabe hippie. As mentioned earlier, I was the youngest of 4 boys. Frankie, the oldest, was 12 years my senior. He had already spent a stint in the Air Force and become a state patrolman by the time I was in my teens. Frank was responsible for our family owning a horse when I was just an elementary school lad. What a wonderful gift to grow up with Prancer, our gentle part quarter horse, part Arabian mare. Before I wanted to be a hippie or a mailman, I wanted to be a cowboy. Frank rode Prancer to my kindergarten class one day so I could give all the kids a ride for show and tell. I remember the principal even taking a little spin. A few years later, while in the 4th grade, I was asked by Mrs. Rowe, my old kindergarten teacher, to bring Prancer to her classroom again and give all the kids a ride. What a great excuse to get out of class in the fourth grade. Prancer didn't even mind making the trip to school on a road and across a freeway overpass that could sometimes have quite a few cars zooming by. Michael, who is 10 years older, took a little different direction in his career path. He was drafted into and spent 2 years in the Army. A few years after military service, he and a business partner opened Strange Stuff, one of the first, if not the first, head shop in Lakewood, Washington. Strange Stuff didn't market itself as a head shop, but rather a place where one could purchase modern home decor. Pillow furniture, water beds, air furniture, various and pretty colorful items from Mexico to decorate your home with, artwork, candles, incense, Kama Sutra pleasure balms and oils, jewelry to include spoon rings, which were very cool, and of course pot smoking paraphernalia. It was a head shop after all. Some of the artwork sold in the shop was a result of Michael's partner and his friends getting together all night with paints, canvases, and acid, the Timothy Leary kind. Not sure if they sold a lot of those paintings. The shop was within walking distance of the junior high I was attending. A few days a week after school, I would walk to the store and work, doing anything from building waterbed frames to selling hash pipes. Although I'd never used a hash pipe at the time, I was getting my wannabe hippie fix just by working in the store. We typically had music playing in the shop, and it was here I became better acquainted with bands like Iron Butterfly, The Stones, Moody Blues, Cream, Sly and the Family Stone, and let us not forget the Velvet Underground and Nico. Sly and the Family Stone was in fact the first concert I ever went to, and it was during the Strange Stuff days. It was very cool to be seeing Sly and the Family Stone, but we were at the University of Puget Sound Fieldhouse sitting in wood bleachers, and rumor had it that Sly and the band were about an hour late because they were in the back watching Sanford and Son. I hope that wasn't true, but regardless, except for the feedback from the bass, it was a great concert, and I was glad to be there. With the music mingled with smells of scented candles and incense, Strange Stuff was a very 70s kind of place to be. By the way, just last week I was invited to and attended a Moody Blues concert in Seattle. They still had 3 other early band members, and I believe a couple of those guys are in their 70s, probably the late 70s. They'd been together as a band for over 50 years. It was a great concert. Patrick is my brother the closest in age. We're 2 years apart. After he decided that perhaps I was more than just a nuisance little brother, we grew to be very close friends. Pat has influenced my life in more ways than he knows. By going before me, he was able to provide an example of some do's and don'ts, some things to avoid and some things to embrace. Also, with careful study of Pat's method, I learned how not to get caught when embracing those things that I should have been avoiding. He sometimes got caught. I think it was probably Pat's love of travel and stories of adventures that sparked the same wanderlust in me. Because my brother did quite well in school academically, and due to our parents' graciousness in providing a big chunk of the needed finances, he was able to travel to Europe as a student ambassador with the People to People program. People to People is a student exchange program that organizes groups of high school kids going to and coming from other countries. The program gives the students an opportunity to live with local families, as well as to see some of the sights that a visitor really shouldn't miss. Pat had more than a wonderful time on his trip, and as a result, I too wanted to try and experience a similar adventure. He traded a ballpoint pen with a Russian soldier in Moscow for an awesome hammer and sickle belt buckle. How cool is that? Brother Pat was also fortunate enough to somehow, over the years, own some of the most beautiful old classic cars of anyone I know. All my brothers seem to have a love for cars. Frankie, for instance, Once had a 1940 LaSalle convertible. Beautiful. And later a 32 Ford Model T. Michael owned a 56 Chevy, a 53 Mercury Monterey, and a 66 Corvette Stingray, to name a few. I still remember when Mike and his then girlfriend, later to become wife Sharon, brought me to the Puyallup Fair in the Monterey. I also remember thinking Sharon was way too pretty and nice for Michael. Pat, however, definitely took the cake when it came to cars. It started with him driving to high school, a punk kid in high school, in an orange 1957 MGA convertible. The MGA may have originally been Frankie's before Pat took possession and put some work into it, and until Michael later confiscated it and made it his own. Michael did teach me how to drive a stick shift in that car, which Pat probably wouldn't have done. So his managing to obtain ownership did work out pretty nicely for me. Michael also managed to get his hands on my 305 Superhawk motorcycle with a sidecar, which I had purchased from Brother Frank and which Michael totaled when he crashed it into a fence. I have to admit that being about 14 years old and owning a Honda Superhawk with a sidecar until Michael obtained it and crashed it was pretty amazing. But back to Pat. After the MGA, there was an absolutely beautiful 1948 Nash, a super clean 65 VW Bug, a cherry 1950 Dodge, a 65 VW Party Bus, a 54 Nash Metropolitan, a super unique 47 Jeep Willys Overland, a 54 VW Bug with sunroof, totaled that one, a classic 56 VW Bug, a 57 VW Carmen Ghia, which also unfortunately got totaled. Thank you God that Pat wasn't hurt worse than he was in that accident. The car ended up flipped over, crashed through a fence, and lodged into a house trailer. Oh, I forgot the 72 VW station wagon, the 48 four-wheel drive Jeepster, the 72 Opel GT, and a 50-something beautiful black convertible Mercedes. Pat definitely had some cars. But then I had a 64 Jeep Willys mail truck with Astro Man. Once again, due to my parents' gracious willingness to finance the lion's share of the trip, and due to my adequate grades in school, how bad can you do when areas of study include band, leatherworks, physical education, and an English composition class called It's Magic? I too was privileged to take part in an amazing trip to Europe with the People to People program. Our It's Magic English teacher, Mr. Fleming, was actually a gifted magician and taught a great class. Also, Mr. Fleming had a bumper sticker on the rear of his car that read, "God bless Bob Fleming." I always liked him. So I think we're going to call that a wrap for today. Next go round, we'll be looking at Chapter 2, entitled A Disturbing Dream. Thanks so much for taking a look at this, or taking a listen, and we'll talk to you next time.